good to see you guys back in the room again. We went from having the heat turned on only a couple of days ago for some of us to having the AC turned on today, so feels pretty good. It's a warm day. So yeah, once again, first Wednesday evening of the month. Seems to roll around quite often, which is always fun. Thank you for choosing to come out and join us tonight. I think we'll have a really fun and impactful and inspirational evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jake Byler. I am currently the host of this meeting, have been the host for a good number of years now, and just always really value getting into a room like this with like-minded people, growth-oriented people, and also providing that opportunity for others. So if you're not on our on our email list for the meetings and you would like to be, you can find out how to get on our email list by checking out that paper on the table in the back, or you can talk to me. These meetings are obviously free. You didn't have to pay to get in here. They are paid for by sponsors, and our sponsors for this year are, we have 6 sponsors. It's Jeff Moeller. Jeff does some private lending. Joe Liowski, Compass Property Management. Both of those guys are in the room here. And Sammy Stolzfuss, Mill Run Storage. Sam Glick, Red Box Dumpsters. Chet Lapp, Providence Abstracting Company. And Ben Yoesh is a local realtor. So those are the guys that pay for the room rental for the year. Eli King is going to give us a little bit of a, might call it a market update tonight. I had asked him if he'd be willing to do that, and he said he would do that. So you can come on up, Eli. It's always fun to, keep tabs on what's going on in the market and kind of figure out where things might be heading. And of course, nobody knows for sure, but Eli, I would say, has his finger on the pulse probably more than most of us, a good bit more than most of us in the room. So Eli's going to share a little bit about what he's seeing in the current market.
Good evening, everybody. Glad to see you here tonight. So yeah, just a quick snapshot on the market from my corner of the world. We have been seeing quite a bit of strength in the entry-level house market in sales. So the houses that we've been selling are right around $200,000. We sold 4 in the last 4 to 6 weeks, and those have all gone pending within a week or so. So very strong there. I would say there's been increased strength in the last 6-8 weeks as compared to the winter. So I would say I would feel that the entry-level market is heating up a bit. Don't have any houses that we're selling in the $400,000 or $500,000 range, so I'm not sure how that market is. The high-end rental market continues to struggle. We have been offering quite a few freshly remodeled luxury-type units, and they're slow. They're slow, and they're renting at prices that are less than they were 2 years ago. So main reason for that would be the large number of completed apartment buildings, brand new apartment buildings. There's just a glut of luxury apartment units on the market right now. However, we are seeing our basic rentals continue to rent strong. The older row homes that are nice and clean or whatever. And I think a good reason for that is that they tend to offer more square feet, more bedrooms than your modern units do. So even though the price difference is only maybe $400 or $500 less, they offer quite a bit more square feet and bedrooms, and there just seems to be a strong demand for the basic rentals. So yeah, that would be about what I have. And I'm also going to be doing an event on how to find deals in July at Horizon Quest up in Ephrata. So I'm going to have some flyers on the table out back, so help yourself to some of those. So thanks for the time, Jake, and looking forward to Darrell here.
Very good. Thanks, Eli. So I feel like every time I try to talk about the value of networking, of getting into rooms like this, I always feel like I actually struggle to express how how much it has impacted my life and how much I think it impacts all of our lives, just getting around people like this. It's really, really hard to measure that type of value. And there's also something, so we're going to hear some really good content and a bit of Darrell's story tonight. And there's something about an individual's personal story and the impact. Sometimes it's stories of redemption, sometimes it's stories of overcoming. It can be all kinds of different things. And as I was thinking about that, I was reminded of a week ago tonight, I was in this same room, except these rooms were all wide open. It was the Light of Hope Prison Ministry Banquet. Were anybody here now that was here a week ago? I thought there might be a few. There was a few back there. And they have, it's a prison ministry that goes to, I forget, 20 or 25 prisons in PA, I think once a year. I did a couple trips with them back before COVID, and so they have an annual fundraiser banquet. And then, I don't know if they always do this, but sometimes they will have a speaker who is a former inmate. So a week ago, in this same building here, we got to hear from an inmate that spent 50 years in prison. At 15 years old, he committed a crime, and he got put in prison for 50 years, and he just got out this past February. And it was a really, really powerful story. A lot of what he talked about was just around the redemption of that. He found Jesus basically 5 years into his sentence. He became a believer, and I believe he really used that influence with the people around him in the prison. And, you know, I think he was glad to get out, but I could tell that that was not the most important thing to him. This man had found meaning, found value, and was actually living a purposeful life behind bars for 45 of those 50 years. And it's just it has nothing to do with our topic or our evening tonight. Well, maybe it does kind of, but I was just reminded of that because we're in the same room and all of that. So it's just a really, really powerful story. And, you know, a couple different things I could comment on that. I mean, one of the things is there's a lot of questions I would like to ask this guy. I mean, those guys in there are not totally isolated. He went in, obviously, at 15. He got an education. I think he got his GED. There's a lot of things you can do, but there's also a lot of things that you can't do. He talked a bit about coming out, getting reintroduced into society, and he's like, yeah, I'm not sure about those cell phones. It's like we used to, I mean, he literally, what's 50 years ago? 1975. Most of us in here were not born in 1975 when this guy got put behind bars. So there's a lot of things I would like to ask him. So anyhow, talking about getting into rooms like this and the people that you meet, that's where I got to meet Darrell Eberly probably 15 years ago. Got started, the meeting we used to go to at the Lancaster Bible College. That's where I met Darrell. I'm not sure how many years into his journey he was at that point, but he was rolling, but he had, you know, he started when he was 41, so he started probably a bit later than most of us have started investing. And there's a ton he could talk about in the world of investing, buying stuff. If you read his bio that I put on the email, you've seen this, but in his first about a year and a half of getting started, he bought 29 apartments and flipped 16 houses. I have a little bit of trouble believing that, Darrell, but I guess that's not a typo. That's a lot of properties. Right. And he did it with, I think, about just under $4,000 of his own money. Now, values have went up since that. There's a lot of things that are different than they were back then. But I would even say the dollar amount there is not the most significant thing. I think it's the principles that you applied and continue to apply that still work today, whether it's, you know, whatever the dollar amount is. So yeah, Darrell got started back then, started just flipping houses and buying apartments like crazy. More recently, got into self-storage, either has owned or does own self-storage in quite a few states, crypto, natural gas, short-term rentals, a bunch of different asset classes. And I'm confident he could talk to us for a long time specifically about those things. But I think most of what he's going to talk about tonight, in my opinion, is actually way more important than the specifics and the how-tos. He's going to talk more about the mindset, what we're calling the mindset of a successful investor. But I mean, you could say the mindset of a successful fill in the blank. It could be anything. It's not just, doesn't just relate to investors. So Darrell's, I think he's going to talk a lot about just, well, one of the things that I know he likes talking about is like, what do you say when you talk to yourself? What's that inner voice in your head saying, right? What do you say when you talk to yourself? And I heard a speaker on this topic one time saying, like, what do you say when you talk to yourself? And he's like, some of you are sitting there thinking, like, what do you mean? I don't talk to myself. He said, that's the voice I'm talking about. If you're sitting there thinking, I don't talk to myself, that's the voice we're talking about. We all have an inner dialogue that is constant. And I don't know that any of us can say we master it completely, but there are things we can do, habits that we can create, and things that we can tap into that will make a world of a difference in that. So Darrell's going to be talking at least a little bit about that. He covered this topic at the Saturday workshop that we did back in March. And I know I've said this before, but I've heard Darrell speak quite a few times. And in my opinion, that was the best I've ever heard from Darrell. It was the most impactful for me. So I asked him if he would be willing to come to the Lancaster group and kind of talk about the same thing. And he said he would do that. So he's here and we're ready. So please help me welcome Darrell Eberly.
Well, thank you, Jake.
Yeah, you
I
bet.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, they say if you see a turtle sitting on a fence post, you know he didn't get there by himself. And I didn't get where I am by myself. I had a lot of coaches and a lot of good people and mentors in my life. And for that, I'm really grateful. I'm happy to have my son, Darrell Eberly, and my wife is here. My son-in-law, Jeremy, is here. So I'm excited to have them here. My wife, Twylee, is an absolute gem. She stuck with me when I was being a beanhead. And so I'm really grateful for her. So, but I have a question for you tonight, and something you can think about. Who would like to own the best cash flowing, most valuable piece of real estate in the entire United States? All right. I got some good news. You already own it. It's the 6 inches between our ears. It's this piece of real estate that you already own. How you develop this project, how you develop this real estate is going to have a lot to do with where you are financially in the next 5 years. So we'll talk about that a little bit tonight. I'm going to talk about some of the things where I was a little bit before real estate came along. I'll talk about some of my journey in some of the areas of real estate I got involved in. And I'll talk about some things, some adversity that influenced my thinking, and probably especially the discovery that I made that changed everything. And for me, some of you know my background. I grew up an old Mennonite farm boy and grew up milking about 180 cows every day on the farm. And I was, like a lot of farm boys, I quit school in 10th grade. And I was a part of the class in school that made the upper 2/3 of the class possible. Some of you can relate with that, but that was me. And but on the farm, I developed a habit. I didn't know I was, but I was. I developed a habit of doing what I didn't really feel like doing. And that I was telling my kids here recently, that probably was one of the best habits I could ever learn. I'm really grateful to have grown up on a farm, but I developed a habit of doing what I didn't really feel like doing. Anybody ever do that? Sure. And that has helped me a lot in a lot of different areas. So starting out, Twyla and I weren't doing too hot financially. Starting out, we had a 1981 Ford Escort. It was two-tone, silver and rust, and it would go like the 0 to 60 eventually. It would get there, and it was one of these cars. It looked so bad. I hated to stop at a four-way intersection because people thought it was an accident. You ever have one of those cars? And one time the speedometer broke, and I'm kind of frugal background, so I didn't get it fixed until like the inspection was due almost a year later, because I didn't need it, because one of the features on this car, the passenger seat, about the time you hit 55, it would vibrate and shake. So even after the speedometer broke, I'd start out, and as soon as the passenger seat like that, it was like 55. So I'm good. It worked. But that was sort of where we started out. And Twyla says I have a black belt in delayed gratification. She's probably right. But I always was kind of frugal, and I always had lived below my means, and I still do today. It's just kind of the way I'm wired. But it was something that even after I started real estate, I wasn't, like as Jake said, I was 41 years old before I ever bought any investment real estate. But even after I started, early on, I did some flipping houses and so forth. And even then, my mindset was, that's what we're talking a lot about tonight, my mindset was, even after I sold a house, and maybe the profit on the flip was, I don't know, 18, 20,000 perhaps. On my way home, my standard routine, on my way home, I would, after settlement, driving home from settlement, I would stop by Walmart and I'd buy 2 bags of beef jerky. I was excited. That fired me up. And I kept pouring everything back into the business, back into to feeding the future, And but that was kind of the way I was wired. And a few months, even over that time before, when I was like 40, 41, just kind of the way I was wired at that point, I had paid down the mortgage on our personal residence. I did every chance I could. I would pay a little bit extra on the principal just to try to pay it down. That was my mindset back then. I was scared of debt, and it's like, why? I got to pay it down. I was just frugal that way. And so we had paid down our mortgage on our personal house. I think we might have owed probably 20% of what the house was worth at that time. And because I was always, okay, I got to get out of debt. That was scary to me. And so, and I started reading along, I think it was, just to give you a little picture of where we were, I think it was a few months before I made a commitment to buy real estate. I had read a book, which a lot of you guys have read, and it was Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad book. And that book influenced me like few I've ever read. It was a point where I read through that. He talks about trading time for dollars and owning assets. And as I read through that, it's like, no wonder. That's why I have a flat spot right here. It's like how, no wonder I'm where I'm at. I was spinning my wheels, just trading time for dollars on the treadmill, spinning my wheels. And it's no wonder, like if hard work was the only key, I think I would have went somewhere. Because even up to that point in my life, it was actually pretty rare that I worked less than 60 hours a week. Growing up on the farm, you learn that. But, that was also a source of my frustration because I felt like I wasn't really going anywhere. And reading that book made a huge impact on me. And it was over that time, probably one of the lowest points in my life financially and the height of some of my frustration. I remember being about almost 41 years old and being in a place financially where I walked out in the backyard of my house, had a little shed back there. I kept the lawnmower and some tools in. I walked out there and grabbed the Craftsman router and its case, walked back into the house. In one of the closets, I pulled out a 12-gauge shotgun, and I went and took those 2 things and sold them to pay bills. If my memory serves me correctly, it was $235. That was hard, especially because I had been paying my dues, I thought, you know, and working hard. But I never heard someone talk about owning an asset. It's like, what's that? And reading that book really, really got my attention, and it really made me think. It's like, no wonder I'm struggling where I'm at. And so at that point, you've heard before inspiration or desperation. For me, it was desperation that got me going. I didn't have the confidence that I could do something, but I for sure understood where I'd be if I didn't do something else. I understood that. Some of you are too comfortable. And for me, it was more of a desperation. I've got to do something. You know, I didn't like the picture. And I remember some individual telling me about that time, Darrell, if you want to know where you'll be for, 5 years from now, it's real simple. Go to work tomorrow, next day. Find someone that's working where you're working in a similar position as you that's been doing it 5 years longer than you. So I went to work the next day, looked around a little bit. I could have cried. That's not what I wanted, but that's what I was doing. Home to work, home to work, home to work, just on the treadmill, trading time for dollars. And it wasn't that I wasn't trying, but I didn't have the insight. But that book was a wake-up call for me. And you've heard me say before, I just, on a farm, we milk 180 cows, day in, day out, 365 every day. I just wanted to do something that would stay done. And when I thought about the whole idea, the concept of buying some apartments, having an asset, something you do the work once and you get paid every month the rest of your life, including your kids and grandkids that you haven't met yet. I'm kind of a logical, simple guy, so that just made sense to me, rather than trading time for dollars just for one time. So that got my attention, and I mentally made a quality decision to buy assets. And a lot of that came from being around in a room like this and getting around the right tribe, getting around people that were going to a similar place. And that has impacted me greatly. One of the nuggets I heard years ago was this: pay any price to stay in the presence of extraordinary people. That's what I did. I got around people that were smarter than me. I got around people that stretched my thinking, and I've never been the same. But I after reading that book, my thinking was, okay, I'm 41 years old. What if by the time I'm maybe 15 years from now, what if I could have 20 apartments and after 15 years have them all paid for? Wouldn't that be sweet? That was my thinking. Wasn't I a massive thinker? But that was my thinking. It's like, wonder if I could get them paid off after 15 years and I would have that income every month coming in, and a stable income, rather than just trading time for dollars. Which is better? Do the work once and get paid every month the rest of your life, or do the work once and then you get another to just trade your time for dollars? You make $35 an hour, trade another hour, you make another $35. What if you could put that hour in and get paid every month the rest of your life? I'm a simple guy. Like I said, that just made sense to me. So it was at things like this that I got the idea that maybe I wasn't stuck where I was at. So I made a commitment to do the work. And at these type of meetings, of course, one little problem, I had very limited cash, as a lot of people that start out. It's a similar situation. And I started to come into these type of things, and I would hear them talk about seller help, the seller playing the bank. It's like, what's that? And I learned about that. And I started hearing them talk about, private financing and them holding the mortgage and paying them the mortgage. And it's like, how's that work? And I really started picking a lot of that up. And as Jake said, the first 18 months, I bought 29 apartments and flipped 16 houses with $3,800 of my own cash. All of those mortgages were 7.5% interest at 15-year notes. Now, any of you who've been around a little bit understand that a 15-year mortgage at 7.5% interest, cash flow is going to be a little tight, right? It's one thing to have a 30-year mortgage or something like that, but cash flow is going to be, and what I did, because I was such, very conservative, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to intentionally make a sort of a forced savings account because of the 15-year mortgage, if you understand. But, it's amazing what happens in a fairly short period of time on equity, isn't it? You guys have been around a while, know how that works. So that started the ball rolling for me, and like I said, it was all my first 2-unit. It took me 4.5 months to get that rascal financed with a local bank. A couple different banks turned me down. Finally, the one bank agreed to work with me, and it was like excruciating, and I hated rejection, and that kind of thing really was difficult for me, just trying to get this rascal financed. And it was a 2-unit apartment building, 348 South Queen Street, $54,000. But it was the best cash flow in apartment building that I could find. And I think after the mortgage was paid and everything else, the positive cash flow was $340 a month. And even though it was a start, I was actually excited because, okay, I did it once. Okay, I can do it again. And that planted a seed in me. Even though it was excruciating getting it financed, it also opened, because I went through that, it also opened up my mind to think, okay, maybe there's a better way to finance these. And so, like I said, I had always lived way below my means, but because of the situation, it opened up my mind. So adversity can open up your mind if we approach things correctly. So they were all 15-year mortgage, 100% financed, and you might say, well, Darrell, you're lucky. No, I was scared. It was more out of desperation for me. I will never forget as long as I live. I think it was approximately the fourth or fifth property we bought. It was a 5-unit apartment with 3 garages, downtown Lancaster. And I remember going through it. It was on the MLS, and my realtor, Phil, we went back to his office after we went through the place and agreed to put an offer in on it. And Phil wrote up the purchase agreement and pushed the agreement across the table for me to sign. I will never forget, I looked at that number and I said, Phil, are you sure? He said, Darrell, this is a good one. This is a good one. Phil, $146,000. How am I ever going to pay that? And I was serious. My hand was shaking when I signed that crazy agreement. Feel the fear, do it anyway. I was scared. I didn't have the confidence or conviction that that was an okay deal. But I trusted Phil, and I figured, well, and in this case, out of the first 65 apartments in 4 years that I bought downtown Lancaster, only the first 2-unit with that bank was financed with the bank. Everyone else, I learned about seller help. The seller played the bank, or I learned about private financing. So how many understand there's some bankers out there that were standing in the wrong line when God was handing out common sense? How many understand that? Okay. They'll loan you money if you don't need it. Okay. So if you want to grow fast, how about understanding private financing? How about understanding the seller playing the bank? That made a massive difference for me. And the only thing I was I had no idea what was about to happen to properties in Lancaster City. I had no idea. Had anything to do with why I bought them. I was thinking about that Rich Dad Poor Dad book and buying assets, and I'm thinking, all I saw was the monthly cash flow. It was the only thing I focused on. And there's a clue. don't buy for appreciation. Sure, the average is probably 6% over the years. That's fine. How's it going for you paying the monthly bills with equity? Can't do that, can you? It's cash flow. Focus on the monthly cash flow. And that really helped me because it was my focus. I had no idea, wasn't even thinking about the appreciation over the years. So, but, I mean, obviously that helped. But because of the way I bought them, and now this is important, obviously they're 100% finance. Is that risky? It depends. Here's a very important part of what I did. Because I was wired to be kind of frugal, I only purchased the one that was, I purchased a bunch of the ones that were HUD properties that had been foreclosed on, and then the bank put them on the market. They were frequently empty, no renters. There's condemned properties, a lot of what some realtors would call junk properties that people didn't want. At that point, investors just puking up multifamilies in downtown Lancaster. The previous, I didn't know this till later, the previous mayor in Lancaster wasn't real friendly to landlords, and it just, a lot of them just like, sick, tired. Now today, I know that smells like opportunity. And then, ooh, I'm excited. So that smells like opportunity. So you gotta be a contrarian. Either you're a contrarian or a victim. Some of you will get that later. But it's, you gotta have that kind of mentality. But I didn't recognize it at the time, but because I was wired frugal, like I said, I bought the stuff that a lot of other investors didn't want. My standard routine, I did a lot of, starting in 2004. I'm sorry, yeah, 2004. I bought those 65 apartments. Most of them were between 2 units and 6 units. In fact, all of them were. And the typical 2-unit I would buy was bad shape, vacant, sitting there, didn't look very nice at all. And I paid on an average somewhere between $34,000 to $38,000 for a lot of them, for those 2 units. The 3-unit cost a little more. Now, here's my point. The average 2-unit that was already nice and pretty and fixed up and fully rented, the ones that everybody else wanted, at that point in 2004, the average 2-unit in Lancaster City selling for somewhere around $78,000 to $80,000. I was buying them at $35,000, $38,000. Till I got them fixed up, they needed work, whatever. On an average, I had around $50,000 in a 2-unit. So, how many understand right away I had approximately $30,000 in equity right away? Now, could I spend that? No. However, I didn't know this in the beginning. I was just doing something. I just made a commitment to do the work because I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like I said, some of you are too comfortable. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I figured I got to go for this. Much better to go for something when you're younger, okay? And so what happened was, over time, I think something happened when I was 7 years in. Something happened. It seemed like it went from adding to multiplying. And at that point, I was talking to a bank one time, and like I said, up to that point, I used hardly any bank, just only for the first one. But I started talking to the bank, and they say, I heard at a meeting like this, them talking about refinancing. It's like, okay, how's that work? And so, because of the way I purchased these properties, I didn't buy the nice, pretty one that everybody wanted, paying full retail on chasing the bid up. Because of the way I bought them, there was a fair amount of equity there after a few years. I didn't have to wait 20. Like I said, this had nothing to do with why I bought them. I wanted for the cash flow. But because of the way I bought them, after 7 years, I remember refinancing, I think it was 5 properties, kind of a blanket mortgage over 5 properties, and I walked away from the settlement with $730,000 over 5 buildings. And I went and bought, I think it was 10 or 12 units up in Mannheim with that. Sold them a year later, bought myself first self-storage facility. think that was 2011, I believe it was. Okay, that led to ownership of 9 storage facilities in about 9 states. The last 4 years, I've invested heavily in about 147 natural gas wells and heavily in Bitcoin. Now, how does a guy that's 41 years old and broke, just trading time for dollars, spinning his wheel on the treadmill, in 21 years, his net worth goes up 86 times what it was? How does that happen? I'll tell you what I did. I developed a habit of reading every day, and I bought assets. I bought positive cash flow and assets that had a profit in your pocket every month. Okay? And it's not lost on me the grace that God had on my life and the favor that He had on my life. It's not lost on me. In fact, every time I walk into a Walmart, it hits me. When I observe the greeter, you notice they're often up in years a little bit. It seems like pretty often they've maybe had a tough life. And it hits me. If not for the grace of God, there go I. If not for the grace of God and a praying mom, there go I. And I think, what did I have to do with the fact that I was born in this country? I could have been born in Afghanistan or something. You know? I'm grateful. But a lot of where we are has to do with me changing my thinking. And that was very much a process. It wasn't something that happened overnight, but some of you are probably like me. You're sitting back there, and I first came to these things feeling insignificant. I remember coming to these things and sitting back there just kind of wanting and wishing and hoping that maybe something could happen. And you might say, well, Darrell, I could see why you could do this. Darrell, you don't know what I've been through. Darrell, you don't know what I'm going through. I may not. I'll tell you a little bit of my story. You see, between the ages of about 8 and 16, frequently I was kicked and beaten by my father. Frequently. But the toughest part for me, though, were the words that my dad said to me. You're going to be standing in the welfare lines. Can't you do anything right? You will never amount to anything. Those early messages haunted me for a long time. There were months, there were years where I was so depressed I could barely get off the couch. You could ask Twyla. I remember being around 17 years old, and my confidence was at the point, if a feed salesman drove in the farm driveway, I would run up in the barn and hide, because I didn't want to talk to him. I couldn't talk to him. That was where I was. And then I started reading. And I read, you're what you are and you're where you are because of what's going into your mind. You can change what you are. You can change where you are by changing what goes into your mind. Zig Ziglar. Every man is where he is because of the dominating thoughts he permits. He permits to occupy his mind. Napoleon Hill. Take every thought captive, 2 Corinthians. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Proverbs 23. I love Proverbs. We always move in the direction of our most dominant thought. Napoleon Hill. What's your dominant thought? Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those that love it and indulge it will eat its fruit and bear the consequences of their words. How's your self-talk? How about you? How is your inner dialogue? That was an area that I probably had the most to learn and grow in. How's your self-talk? One of the books I read, there was many, one of the books I read is What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. That book gave me suggestions of actual new language I could give myself and sort of change the programming. See, you know, God gave you an amazing computer. This is very fertile ground. It will grow whatever seeds you plant. You can be like a farmer. He plants the right seeds. That principle has changed my life. You need to think about what you're thinking about. Become aware of that. That principle is, I'll give you an example. What is a neural pathway in our brain? On the farm, we had a field lane that went back through the farm. And over and over and over and over again, we would use that field lane. Over and over and over, the same tracks. And often it was a little muddy or something, the wagon wheel ruts would just get deeper and deeper. Our mind, neural pathways, is the way our brain works as well. In other words, you're thinking the same thought over and over and over again, over and over and over again. How many understand our thoughts attract other like thoughts? If you're saying to yourself, well, I just can't remember names. How many ever said that besides me? Okay, you've been confessing that for how many years now? How's it working? See, you still can't remember names. You're a prophet. It's working. Okay? We got to be careful about our confession. You're programming the computer. I just can't remember names. I just can't remember names. Over and over and over, that wagon wheel rut, over and over and over. And after a while, our brains, it's the way God made it. It's the way our brain is wired. When you tell yourself lies over and over and over, you start to believe them. The cool thing is the opposite's true as well. Okay? So think about what you're thinking about. Become aware of that. Are you replaying the past failures? Your perception, this is a critical one. Your perception of how you view failure will make a big impact on where you go in life. Any young kids and so on, teach them how to approach failure. Here's the way I like to look at it. Either you win or you learn. We're going to win next time. So failure is an event that happens to all of us. It's not a person. In fact, I would venture to say the people in this room that have, quote, failed the most are probably making the most money. Okay? Thomas Watson was the president of IBM. Thousands of employees. He had a meeting one time, and he told all these employees, go double your failure rate. You're playing it too safe. That's good advice. Go double your failure rate. See, that's the way we learn. Some of you are paralyzed in fear that you'll fail when you're giving up a learning opportunity. I probably just made more mistakes faster. Honestly, I think that's what I did. I made more mistakes faster. You know, you either win or learn. It's not a negative, you win or learn, okay? Are your memories bigger than your dreams? Are you replaying the past? You know, you can't quit. Winners don't quit. Does anybody in the room here have a baby that is right at the stage where they're just starting to walk? Anybody have a baby's kind of that stage? Okay, they're fun at that stage, isn't it? Okay, and they start out, and they're like this, and finally they try to take a step, and what happens? They fall down. So what's the baby say? Oh, forget that walking deal. I guess I'm just not a walker. No, they just jump back up and they try again, right? They just try again, and they fall down, and they get back, and they try again. Winners don't quit. They just try again. You know, and you sort of fail your way to the top. You know, some of you are playing it too safe. You know, because it's a process we all go through, okay? How many of you have an inner critic? Anybody have one of them besides me? That voice was pretty loud, as you can imagine. And I had to recognize the lies that were coming with that voice, okay? So I'd recommend firing him. So I would. And one of the ways that you can fire him is being aware of your inner conversations, your inner dialogue, okay? Here's the principle that was probably the most life-changing thing I've ever learned, is when I discovered that just because a thought comes into mind doesn't mean I need to dwell on it, fertilize it, or marinate on it. I could choose to discard it and replace it with life-giving thoughts. That principle totally changed my life. And most of that came from reading good books. There's this book probably has more like actual suggestions and ideas on that than any of them. Most of you have read that book. The book is used a little bit. Okay? But you can learn those principles. Typically, we're not naturally aware of that. I certainly wasn't. Okay? But that principle was absolutely life-changing for me. How many of you have ever confessed or made the statement, well, I'm just a procrastinator? I was going to write a book about that subject, but just never got around to it. Okay, I'm going to show you something. I like to carry little reminders. If you can read this, the letters on that is T-U-I-T. This is a round to it. It's a little reminder that I keep in my pocket. Okay, someday, okay? No, having a sense of urgency. I've studied and studied and studied successful people. It's something I enjoy learning about, and I'm on a journey. I certainly haven't arrived by no means. I've studied a lot of successful people. You know something I've observed? You've probably noticed this. Have you noticed a lot of them tend to walk faster? They tend to have an urgency about them. They tend to have deadlines and goals, and they might even be a little impatient, okay? You know, yeah, they tend to have an urgency. How many of you have ever, see, it's amazing what happens when you got a deadline, how much you can get done. How many of you ever woke up on a Saturday morning and you really didn't have any particular thing planned that day, and it was 2 o'clock just like that? Or a different Saturday morning, you had 8, 10 things on your calendar that you had to do. We're going on vacation tomorrow. We got to get this all done before we leave. Isn't it amazing what happens? Oh, you can get done when you have a deadline. Amazing things happen when you have a sense of urgency and a deadline. But see, that's 100% in your control. You can choose that. None of us are promised tomorrow. I've always felt very strongly, I don't know where this came from, but I've always felt very strongly that I needed to put my wife in a position, if God forbid something happened to me, that she would be okay. That was just, it was important to me. And personally, I didn't feel like I had much business playing if she wasn't in a good position. That was just me. I'm not putting that on you, it's just the way I was wired. But having a sense of urgency, if we're too comfortable or if we don't have a plan, some of you don't have confidence right now because you don't have a plan. When you got a plan, even if you don't always hit your goal, you still feel better about yourself because you got a plan. Okay, that's important. Okay, the only limits you have are the self-imposed limiting beliefs you marinate on. Anybody ever replay a negative besides me? Okay. I would submit to you, if you're not consistent in your actions as a real estate investor, it's because you're not consistent in your thinking. The cool thing is you can control that. You can choose what you choose to dwell on, what you marinate on, what you continually replay in your brain, okay? One of the questions, and I want to talk more about this self-talk in a little bit, but one of the questions that I personally ask myself a lot, And it's something, if you have any adversity in your life of any sort, regardless of what it is, think about maybe a challenge you're having right now. Here's a question I'd encourage you to ask yourself. What is the lie that I'm believing in this situation? What is the lie that I'm believing in this situation? And you may not have an answer. But I encourage you to pray about it, ask for wisdom. There's a verse that I confess over my life almost every day. And it's the verse in James. It says, if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God, and he'll give it to him liberally. The next part says, but let him ask in faith, not wavering. For a long time in my life, I think I was a professional waverer. Is that a word? Maybe, I'm not sure. But I was good at it. because it was one of those things. I'm excited, crash and burn. I'm excited, crash and burn. I'm excited, crash and burn. And that was like 15 minutes. I was all over the place. If you're not consistent in your actions as a real estate investor, you're probably not consistent in your thinking, okay? And that a lot of that starts, correcting that, starts with just committing to do the work and understanding, becoming aware of your self-talk, okay? Don't waver. Words build, words destroy. Your words to your kids becomes their inner dialogue. Be really careful with that. That's a big one. Be aware of that. Inspiration or desperation. Now, as I said before, I think I was more on the desperate end of things. I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. You know, maybe I was different, but I got to the point, it's like, Darrell, just be honest with yourself. Your way ain't working. After 41 years working that many hours, your way don't work. Just be honest. I like the 11th commandment. It says, faketh thyself not out. I was just honest with myself. I realized most guys don't do that. I discovered. But I don't like kidding myself. I was honest with myself with where I would be if I didn't do something different, okay? And so why doesn't inspiration last, okay? How many of you have ever had Chinese food for lunch? And you had this big Chinese meal, and 2 hours later, I'm hungry. It doesn't last, does it? That's inspiration or motivations like that. I want you to think about something. How many of you have ever gone to perhaps a real estate conference for a day or two, or maybe it's your work or your profession, your job. They had a one-day conference perhaps, and at the end of that time, that end of that day, you were fired up. I am buying 10 apartments next month. I'm doing this thing. I am committed. I'm doing this thing. And like two days later, you're on the couch just to scroll on Facebook. What happened? Here's what happened. Those people at that conference were excited, but they went home with the same negative self-talk replaying in their mind that they've had the last 35 years. They didn't change what they were telling themselves. And so they go back to old habits. It takes repetitive, ongoing instructions to your subconscious mind if we're going to change that. So here's some ideas on some self-talk. In fact, I'll give you an example. I remember, I think it might have been 3 years in, something like that, after I started buying stuff. I had a tenant that, I'll put it this way. I was going along having a pretty good day, and all of a sudden, a thought came into my mind. It was about a tenant that I was really struggling with, major evictions, cost me about $8,000. She had a master's degree in entitlement mentality and playing the victim, believe me. She was good at it. I grant she was good. And she hired a free attorney, you know how they do, and it took me like months, and it cost me a lot of money. That thought come into my mind. And even 15 minutes earlier, I was having a good day. For the rest of the day, I had a lousy day. Because I hadn't yet understood the importance of thinking about what I was thinking about. Take every thought captive, right? I hadn't yet learned that. So you can decide, what you're going to dwell on. Here's some thoughts on self-talk. Your brain simply believes what you tell it the most, what you say when you talk to yourself, okay? What if I could learn how to change or override my old programming by replacing those limiting thoughts? Okay. It requires constant positive reinforcement, repetitive reinforcement, because that's the way our brain works. So God made us, okay? We get to choose, though. The missing ingredient for most people, and this is why self-talk is critical, the missing ingredient for most people is a new word-for-word set of instructions, new programming to the subconscious mind. Here's something you can write down. Erase and replace. Erase and replace. I had to learn that it wasn't enough. If my background, environment, and so on, there's a lot of negative there, it wasn't enough to simply stop thinking negative. Well, I'm just not going to think negative. I'm not going to speak negative. Most of us know not to speak negative, but if we're speaking negative, then it's really a problem, okay? But a lot of us have that inner conversation. We're just beating ourselves up, over and over and over about a challenge of some sort, okay? And when that happens, we develop habits like those ruts in the back across the field lane, over and over and over, thinking those same thoughts. So we have to replace those, and given some real specific instructions on instead of the negative we're dealing with. Okay. Remember, the subconscious mind is always listening and waiting for our instructions, and it doesn't care what we tell it. It just does it. Understand that. Some of the best self-talk begins with I am organized, I am focused, I'm prosperous. Okay. We are most comfortable with thoughts that we have lived with the most. It makes no difference if those thoughts aren't the best for us. It's what we know. It's how we've been programmed. Well, I just can't remember names. I've learned I don't say that anymore. I gave new instructions to the best computer on the world. You have as well. I gave new instructions. What do? It'll come to me. The name's coming to me. It'll come to me. And it does. Most of us are given, we program our mind with all the wrong stuff. And it's a choice we have, what we're going to choose to dwell on. Okay? How many of you have ever made a confession out loud, or even you've thought about it? I would buy 10 apartments this month. I just don't have the 20% down for the deposit. How many said that besides me? Yeah. Sure. What's your expectation? One guy says, I can't afford it. The next guy says, how can I afford it? The first guy says, I can't afford it. His brain even immediately starts, just the way it works, his brain immediately starts saying, okay, I can't afford it. And it attracts other like thoughts. It's like, well, yeah, I can't afford it. I better look at my checkbook and check it. I for sure can't afford it. And it reinforces that thought. The other guy says, how can I afford it? And what's his brain do? Well, what can I do? Okay, who do I know that just sold a farm that could play the bank? Who do I know that just sold a business that could play the bank? Your choice. Our brains will grow whatever seeds we plant. Very fertile soil. So we got to decide. It's just the way our brain works. We have to decide what we're going to erase and what we're going to replace. Okay? It's all how we've been programmed. So you can decide how you want to, what you want to focus on. Okay? That's a critical part. As I said before, it's not enough just to stop being negative. You have to replace, give your mind new instructions of where you want to go, not where you are. Okay? That's important. Recognize that. Recognize some of those instructions. Okay. So some other ideas on just on self-talk, just some options. Well, Darrell, that's just mind over matter. No, it's mouth over matter. Your words are the programmer. This little thing here is the programmer for our computer. So what you say is critical. What if, okay, let's say everybody in the room wanted to buy 10 apartments this month. What would happen? What if you developed new language for the way you think? What if you developed new, instead of saying, I just can't afford it, I don't have a deposit, I can't buy apartments. What if instead you told yourself a bunch of times, I'm meeting new people, new guys that'll play the bank for my apartments. I'm meeting them every month. I'm running into new people every month that just sold a farm that could play the bank. My business is growing like crazy because I have abundant finances. Abundant finances are flowing into my business every day. What if you started saying that? Is it immediate? No. In fact, I'll be honest with you. When you first start saying those kind of things to yourself, you're going to feel really silly. Congratulations, you're right on track. That's good. Keep doing it. I talk to myself a lot. In fact, if you're running around Lancaster County somewhere and you see some guy sitting at a red light in a pickup truck talking to himself, that's probably me. Okay, I've learned that I got to talk to myself right. What are you telling yourself? What are you replaying in your mind over and over? Are you replaying the past failures? Or is your memories bigger than your dreams? What are you replaying? Become aware of that. But just some examples. I would encourage you to take, write out a list of, let's say 10 to 15 new positive affirmations in an area that you want to grow in. It might be real estate, it might be any area of your life. But write out some specific instructions of what you're going to tell yourself. This principle changed my life. I'd be driving down the road, glancing at it, and talking to myself. Okay? Better yet, do it in a real enthusiastic tone of voice in a mirror, and you're going to feel really silly, but I'll tell you it works. I had to convince this brain that had a lot of lies from my past. I had to start telling it the truth. The best way is to confess specific scriptures over your life. Well, Darrell, I'm scared. God hasn't given me a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. Feel the fear and do it anyway. Identify specific scriptures that speak to your doubts or what you're facing. That's life-changing, okay? But understand that. Be careful what nuggets, what thoughts you fertilize. Understand which ones you fertilize and understand which ones you discard, okay? Some of you have probably studied the personality traits a little bit. How many understand the DISC, the different personalities? Okay. I would have a tendency to be kind of the DC personality. I have enough C in me that I could easily go down the worrying route. I'm too quick to go there probably. Okay. It's the way God made us. Okay. So it helps me to recognize that. So I heard recently probably the best definition of worry that I've ever heard in my life. I have survived many of life's great tragedies, 99% of which have never happened. Think about it. Isn't that what worry is? I thought that nailed it. It really made me think. It's like, yeah, okay, nailed it. Think about it. Worry is kind of the misuse of the imagination. Okay, it's just opposite of faith. So. But there's a myth out there that says, okay, once I'm confident, then I'm going to buy my first 3 unit. I got news for you. It don't work that way. It's just opposite. When you put in the work, the confidence comes after. If you're waiting on confidence until you put something and start and do something, swing the bat, you'll probably be waiting a long time. You'd be reading that procrastination book I wrote. or thought about writing. Okay? Okay? Act first. Inspiration and confidence will come as you grow. You're more likely to act yourself into feeling than feeling yourself into action. Beginning's half done. It really is. When you make a commitment just to do something, even if it's wrong, double your failure rate. And for a C personality, that blows my computer, honestly. But I know it's the way the principle works. I don't live my life by emotion. I live by principles. When you live your life by emotion, I'm excited, crash and burn, I'm excited, crash and burn, like I said. No, you got to live your life by principles. This is a principle that's life-changing. You're more likely to act yourself into feeling than feeling yourself into, okay, then I'm going to take action. No, take action. Just do something, even if it's wrong. Take action. Make a commitment. I am going to buy my first 3-unit apartment building. Make a commitment. How about if you say, okay, I'm going to buy 10 apartments in the next 6 months. You buy 2 different 3 units and 1 4-unit apartment. You have 10 apartments in 6 months. That's 3 settlements. Okay? Could you do 1 settlement every 2 months? Is that reasonable? Sure, that's reasonable. But Darrell, I don't have the money for the deposit. Change what you're saying. I have abundant finances coming into my business every day. I'm meeting the guys that are playing the bank for my next bill. I'm meeting them every month. Change your expectation. If you start praying for a horse, you better start learning to ride. You got to have that expectation. And that's a choice that we can all make. But you have to be aware of it. You have to think about what you're thinking about. You have to be aware of what you're dwelling on. Okay? Beginning is really half done. Writing a gratitude list for me has been very, very helpful because it makes me focus on the things that I'm grateful for, which I have much, much to be grateful for. Write that out and develop a habit of, keep adding to it, develop a habit of maybe when you're having a rough day of pulling that out and giving you perspective. It gives you perspective on what you can really be really grateful for, okay? It's important, okay? I like this example here. Money is just a measurement of how many problems you've solved. It's a measurement of how much value you've added to others. Don't have much money? Solve more problems. I think if we interviewed the guys that you respect in this room, if we interviewed each of them, they would say they're solving more and bigger problems today than you ever did. It pays good, don't it? Your perspective on how you see a problem is huge. Okay, how about this? We got a problem? I solved this rascal. I'm getting a raise. Instead of, oh, I got this problem. I got this problem. Okay? A third grader is more in their emotions. It's like, I'm tired. Okay? Instead of being assertive and monitoring their self-talk, being aware of how critical that is. Solve more problems. And there's a myth out there that somehow, once I do this or that, or once I have 10 units, or once I have 20 or 30, whatever, then life's just going to be grand. Okay? No, life's hard. But learn to change your perspective in the way you view a problem. See, I'm about to get a raise. Okay? The mindset. Real wealth is time freedom. It doesn't, to me, really have a whole lot to do with the amount of money that's made. To me, it's the choices and the freedom you have is much more valuable. Okay? Just having the option, having the choice on time freedom. If you're only trading time for dollars, it's kind of a challenge to do that. You could be an attorney making $300 an hour, and what happens if you don't show up at the office? Income stops, right? Or you can buy an asset and have an ongoing income, okay? But you just got to take action. How much is your average monthly income on apartments that you almost bought 5 years ago? probably the same as mine. Okay? You just got to take action. Focus on the things that are in your control. You can't control the president. You can. So many people. We live in a society. This honks me off, but we live in a society that the entitlement mentality or victim mentality, playing the victim mentality, is pretty prevalent. And they blame their boss, they blame the president, they blame their mom, they blame their dad, they blame tariffs, they blame everybody else. No, personal responsibility means looking in the mirror, like, you know what? I'm responsible for that guy. Okay, I got to make better choices. Okay, I made a bad choice. I'm going to make a better choice next time. Okay, no more trading time for dollars. You heard me talk about this, and this was so ingrained in my brain from reading that book. It made a big impact on me, and it was like, maybe it was because I was working a lot of hours for a bunch of years and just spinning my wheels, but it really made sense to me. It's like, I must own assets. Not should, would, could, or maybe. I must own assets. Okay, and just to buy them. And before you can buy an asset, you first have to know what an asset is. To me, personally, my definition is an asset is something that puts profit in your pocket every month, regardless of your health or ability to produce. That's an asset. Now, I enjoy teaching my grandkids, and a week or so ago, my oldest grandson, Liam, was at my house, and I got to thinking, I think I'm going to do a little test. And so I asked Liam, I said, Liam, finish this statement for me. Instead of trading time for dollars, and he went, buy assets. It's like, yes. And I said, Liam, what's an asset? And he goes, something that makes money while you're hunting. It's like, yes. I don't know where he gets that. Somebody asked me one time, are you a hunter? I said, oh, no. No, I'm an endangered plants rights activist. That's what I do. Okay? I just got back from South Africa here a couple weeks ago, and over there I found a couple of animals that looked really guilty. In fact, I looked through the scope. Yeah, they were definitely guilty, definitely. I just had to do the right thing. I'm saving plants. So I'm starting up a Lancaster chapter of the Endangered Plants Rights Activist Club. Anybody want to join up? Okay? Yeah, we're saving plants. But what would you do if you had your freedom? It struck me. It hit me like a few times before. When I got home after being in South Africa for about 15 days. And the next day, after about approximately an hour and a half, 2 hours, I thought to myself, I'm pretty well caught up. And how much that has changed. That's not because I'm that smart. It's because I own assets. An asset is here. To me, people have the goalpost at the wrong place. The goalpost for me is this question: how many people are responsible to pay you every month, even regardless of your health or ability to produce? That's a good place to be. Okay, that's what buying assets. You delegate. You have people managing properly. You check in every now and then, monitor closely, but that's how freedom comes. Okay. Some people own their own business. Some people, the business owns them. And the typical challenge, if you read Robert Kiyosaki's The Cash Flow Quadrant book, especially, it talks about this, but he talks about the business owner being one of the hardest working people on the planet. They're in that quadrant. And he talks about, especially if you have some C personality in them, the most toxic thing, the most toxic thought that a business owner can think is, oh, in the time it takes me to teach that guy, I could do it 3 times better myself. I'll just do it myself. Congratulations, you're on the treadmill and you can't get off because you haven't delegated. You don't own assets. You're trading your time for dollars. What happens if you go hunting for a couple months? Okay. That was bigger than I could think at that time. But we just started, and You know, each step took a little bit bigger step, okay? Comparison is the thief of joy. I struggled with this one. As you can imagine, with a pretty negative background, I would be real quick to compare myself. It's like, there's no, I remember coming to one of these early on, and a guy was talking about having 30 apartments. And I had just struggled like 4.5 months to buy a 2-unit. And it's like, how could anyone ever have 30 apartments? It must have taken him 100 years. It's like, how could anyone ever do that? And here's the challenge with that. We tend to compare our temporary weakness with somebody else's developed strength that they might have been working 20 years at. Don't do that. If you insist on comparing yourself, here's what you do. Compare your activity towards your goal compared to what your decision was. Your goal was, hey, I'm going to talk to 5 people this week about playing the bank on financing my first apartment. If you want to compare yourself, compare that, because that's something in your control. You can't control the economy. You can't control interest rates. You can't control none of that, pricing of houses, whatever. But you can control that. If you want to compare something, do it on things that keep yourself accountable. Don't wish it was easy or wish you were better. Jim Rohn. I love that comment. Most people think, well, once I'm a certain age, once the kids are older, once I'm out of school, once I made a certain income, life's going to get easier. No, life's hard. Make yourself a person that handles hard well, not someone waiting for the easy. A lot of people waiting for the easy bus to come around. Where's the easy bus? Okay. To me, buying assets was far easier than what I did. I was working, busting my tail, going nowhere. How hard should I work with something that could actually get freedom? I was like all over it. You know, I understood the alternative real good. I didn't have the confidence that something could happen to me, but I understood the alternative where I'd be for sure. And that motivated the socks off of me. Okay? Don't be someone waiting for the easy. Real men do the hard things. Okay? Don't be waiting for the easy. Well, Darrell, I'm just a procrastinator. I don't have time. If you keep doing what you're doing, when will you have time? Think about it. There's no such thing as a time problem. It's a priority thing. And I'm going to suggest something. Now, this is only for the folks that are really serious, or perhaps you're like me, just sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm going to suggest something that has been life-changing for me. Do a time audit. And when I say that, there's a book especially that I learned this from, and some of you have read it, The Compound Effect by Darren Daly. Life-changing book. Do a time audit. And here's what this is. Write out your, take for the next 10 days, and write out specifically in 30-minute sections, 30-minute time periods, what you're doing with your time. For 24 hours around the clock for the next 10 days. And what you do, break it down into 4 segments, okay? You can break it down into your work. You can break it down into spiritually. You can break it down into entertainment. And you can put maybe sleep in there, or physical if you want. Maybe exercise or sleep, and put them in the same category perhaps. But my point is, do a time audit and check yourself over 10 days. At the end of that 10 days, just review it. Okay, is those priorities honestly my priorities? And I find in most people are shocked. What it does is it helps people be honest with themselves. Faketh thyself not out, right? Okay? I did that, and I was surprised how much time I had. You know what? Most people, entertainment is the main event for them, okay? And they wonder why they're struggling. So, but it'll help you recognize, become aware of where your time, tell your time where to go rather than wonder where it went, right? There is no such thing as a time problem. It's a priority problem. The question isn't whether you have time. How many understand people make time for what's important to them? Yeah, exactly. People have time for what's important to them. So I had to decide, were the things in my calendar honestly taking me closer to where I want to go? Do a time audit. It's life-changing what'll happen there in that case. The number one chief cause of failure in any endeavor is broken focus. Broken focus is a big one. Let's say you made a decision, I am buying 10 units in the next 6 months. I'm buying 10 apartments in the next 6 months. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm buying 10 apartments. And let's say you're the pilot of an airplane. You're sitting at the beginning of the runway, and you're ready to take off. I am doing this. I'm ready to go. And you hammer down on that throttle, and you're doing this, okay? And you get part way down the runway, and you get a Facebook prompt, oh, and Matilda's having leftovers for lunch. Oh, that's interesting. And 20 minutes later, you're still scrolling Facebook. Are you ever going to take off? No. Winners recognize distractions. Burn the phone, okay? If that's what's doing it, okay? Do the hard things. If there's something that's in a distraction in your life that's honestly not taking you where you want to go, do the hard things. Make it a priority for you. Don't get involved in broken focus, okay? That's a big one, okay? I mentioned about doing a schedule audit, a time audit, okay? There's no such thing as a time problem. Like I said, it's a priority problem. Here's a nugget you may want to write down that really makes me think every time I talk about it. What I'm not changing, I'm choosing. What I'm not changing, I'm choosing. That really gives me perspective. It helps me tell myself the truth. Ponder that a little bit. What distractions are in your life? You know, what makes your heart beat fast? Like I said before, are your memories bigger than your dreams? What makes your heart beat fast? What cranks your crank, floats your boat, and mows your lawn? You know, what is it that really fires you up? Identify that. Pretty critical. A man without a vision perish, right? A man without a vision for his future will often revert to his past. See that a lot. He's got to be taking action. All the right thinking in the world, all the reading books in the world is worthless without action. I know of a guy that has this wonderful library, many amazing books. And I was in there one time and asking about this book and that book. It's like, oh, no, I never read it. I heard it's a good book. It's not the book you buy, it's the book you apply. It's the one that you actually learn from and apply it. Okay? The book itself is worthless, but you got to apply it. So it's a matter of recognizing those things, not being afraid to do the hard things. When you know where you're going, it doesn't seem like work. When you're out there, you got a plan, your confidence goes up. Okay? Here's a couple books. You can just take a picture of that if you want. A couple books that were life-changing for me. The one in the bottom there, The Cure. If you may have had a challenge or some negative in your background, for a lot of that for me was related to my identity and the way I saw myself, the way Father God sees me. And I had a lot to learn in that department. That book is phenomenal that way. It really helped give me the right perspective. Okay. Understand how critical it is, the programming those words that you're programming in your mind. Your biggest area of pain can become your platform if you'll forgive. Unforgiveness, bitterness corrodes the container that it's carried in. You See, I forgave my dad. In fact, December 14th, 2014, we're sitting around Mom and Dad's kitchen table, and Dad asked me, with tears streaming down his face, "Darrell, will you forgive me?" I said, "Dad, absolutely, absolutely." That evening, there was generations of stuff cut off. No more to be in our family. I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for forgiveness. That moment was life-changing for me. If you want to know if my story with my dad registers with you, there's a video that I have of my dad, the journey with my dad on YouTube. You can see it there. It's if you search Father Wounds Forgiven and then my name, it'll come up. I'm discovering the truth about how my loving Father God sees me. And the question I ask myself is, how can I withhold forgiveness from someone else with as much as God's forgiven me? If you're in this room and you perhaps had an imperfect father or mother, I want you to think about something. I want you to ask yourself a question. Perhaps someday you're going to be looking at them in the casket. What would need to happen in that moment for you not to have any regrets? The only answer I could come up with is to forgive. I had to forgive. And there was a real freedom came with that. The lie that I was most susceptible to is that you are never enough. I've learned to replace that. Erase and replace, right? I've learned to replace that with God's for me, not against me. Start telling myself the truth. For a long time, I didn't value my voice. It took me a long time to share. It took me a long time to talk about the shame of my story with my dad. Every successful person you admire survived a season that you probably didn't see. Understand the difference between guilt and shame. See, guilt's actually a healthy thing. It leads us to forgiveness, helps us get on the right track. Guilt says, I made a mistake. Shame screams, you are a mistake, totally unworthy of any kind of love or affection. That's not your loving Father God talking. One of the verses in the Bible talks about describing the enemy, uses the words, he's a deceiver of the brethren. That means he lies. Recognize that. You may have had an imperfect father or mother. Just recognize that may have influenced you. Just don't permit it to define you. You might be sitting here tonight, and there's people that you've had a challenge with in your life, you had some adversity with. Recognize hurting people hurt people. Understand that people that have unrecognized, unhealed trauma in their life hurt other people. Forgive them. It's not you. You know what? I can't wait. I can't wait to hear your story. We've got a lot of overcomers in this room. When I look out there, I see overcomers. I see guys that got grit and grace. I see guys that are learning to tell themselves the truth. I encourage you to stay hungry. I encourage you to be teachable. Stay curious. If there's any of you that my story with my dad resonates with you, I'd really like to talk to you afterwards. I'd love to meet you. I have a free book here I want to give you. So I've enjoyed sharing with you tonight. Stay teachable. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much, Darrell. And yeah, I would highly encourage you, check out that YouTube video. I might even, maybe I can send it along out in the email tomorrow. I can maybe do that. I've watched that quite a few times, and it's a very, very impactful video. Yeah, hopefully you were taking a lot of notes. I thought of another one, a quote or more than just a short quote, but something you might add to your collection. It goes, your mind is a garden, your thoughts are the seeds. You can grow flowers or you can grow weeds.
Love it.
I did not come
Love
up
it.
with that one, but I memorized
Love
it.
it. Good stuff.
Just a couple wrap up things here. Again, if you're interested in the event that Eli mentioned, grab a flyer. I don't know much about the event, but I'm just a huge believer in going to things like that. I mean, I know for me, going to meetings like that, like this, over a bunch of years, sometimes it's just one little nugget you get out of something that can literally propel you forward, like, unbelievably. It's not always about, you don't remember everything. Not even everything resonates with you or is even interesting to you, but maybe you'll get one thing that really has the potential to change the course of your life. So if you want to learn more about that, Eli's got some information. Next month, with a bit of a different twist again, which we like doing. How many of you guys are familiar with the Brio fire pits? How many of you would like to hear the guy behind that business talk next month? Mr. Amos Stolzfus is on the schedule. He's the owner of Brio. Very interesting guy. I'm in a book study group with him. And he obviously is a business owner. It's a very large business, but he also does some investing. And his investments of choice, at least a few of them, are farms and short-term treasuries, which is not the most popular choice for most of us probably, but I'm looking forward to hearing more, hopefully hearing more about that. So I believe that is it for tonight. So, oh yeah, yeah, we do have time for a couple questions. If you, somebody has some burning questions for Darrell on anything he shared about, he's open to taking a couple questions. Right here.
Did you sleep at all the first time you went to the bank and realized you were sitting on all that equity, some debt properties, and the check you rolled down with the amount of properties you had left to do the same thing, repeat? How
Yeah.
about that night for you?
I didn't. I'm sorry? Oh, yeah. I bought Walmart out.
So the question is basically how that impacted you, knowing you have that much equity and that much possible money to spend to buy more stuff, right?
Yeah, after you walked out when you did that first 500
Yeah.
and it dawned on you how much equity you
It dawned on me, however, it was exciting. However, that's not why I got in this business. I got in for the cash flow. This was something that wasn't on my radar until I got around the group, and after a while I realized, okay, yeah, that was an option. I wasn't that big of a thinker. I wasn't. This has been a journey for me. It's not, I was not the guy that was going to build some massive business. But the more I got around, it's a little bit like tonight. When you drive home, your headlights shine a certain distance. The farther you go, the farther you see. And all of a sudden, like you said, I realized, oh my. I didn't see that coming. But the more I got around people like this, I started, maybe, yeah, okay. I'm adjusting well. but I didn't see that coming. I wasn't that big of a thinker. I just decided I'm going to do the work. I'm going to develop that. And in time, it's like, sure. Yep.
I have another question that I thought of as you were sharing that I don't really expect a specific answer to this, but I'm curious what your response is. So, as many of us, you started with very little, worked towards the goal of owning assets, having passive income. Would have been hard to even imagine being in a position where you have the passive income that's just enough to get by. Today, you have far surpassed that level, and you'll probably have more than you ever know what to do with, which is true for more people in the room. How's that journey of that takes your mind for a little bit of a spin?
Mm-hmm. Sure. I read a book called Halftime. And it talked about how do I go from success to significance. It's very interesting for me. I'm learning that the people that are the most fulfilled in life, the vast majority of the time, somehow, they get their focus on helping other people. And if you're miserable without money, you'll probably be miserable with it. It's just a tool, that's all. You can get your freedom, you can have a lot of options, but I encourage you, and that happens to you, you've climbed the ladder, well, send the elevator down, you might say, and help somebody else. Sure. The most fulfilling thing I ever done is making a difference in the lives of other people. The money doesn't even come close. I don't know if I answered your question.
That's good. That's good.
It's something I've learned along the way.
That's good. One more question, anyone? Matt? How many of the first 27 properties or units do you still have today?
The first 29 were the first year and a half, first 18 months. I have one property, it's a 5-unit. Yep. Part of, and this is up to the individuals, part of, for me, was along the way, you know what? This investment is a better return and less drama. So that influenced, you know, I really like self-storage that way, okay? But there were things that had gone up a lot in value that I sold and redeployed into other things. There was a time when I went down through the apartments and looked at which apartments caused me the most drama in the past years. They're for sale. And my drama dropped by 90%. So, you know, some of that's the area they're in, some of it, but sure. Yeah. If I answered your question.
But it's also important to remember you didn't start there.
Yeah, exactly.
You were okay with some drama. You were okay with solving some of those problems at the early on.
Yeah. It's a journey. It's a process.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think Darrell will probably be sticking around for a bit. Usually, what happens in a time like in an evening like this is they kind of get him cornered in the back of the room somewhere, and he has another little meeting after the meeting. So that'll conclude the evening. How about another big hand for Darrell?
My name's Darrell Eberly. My story is one of father wounds forgiven. My relationship growing up with my dad was a tough one. You see, my dad and generations before him carried a lot of anger and shame and depression. I remember being around 12 years old and not understanding why I was being hit and being beaten. The toughest part for me, though, were the words that my dad spoke to me. You're going to be standing in the welfare lines. Can't you do anything right? You will never amount to anything. Those early messages haunted me. I grew up on a Pennsylvania dairy farm, a conservative Mennonite farm boy. I had become driven to perform. I believed the lie that my value was only in my performance. Around age 22, during one of the toughest times with Dad, I had a dream one night. The setting in the dream was at the farm where my dad grew up. I was out in the yard with my siblings and my mom watching as Dad, in this dream, was running away from the family towards a massive angry bear at the edge of the woods. And I yelled, "Dad, stop! Stop! Dad, please stop!" At the last minute, Dad turned and started walking back toward the family. And I woke up suddenly knowing that God had given me this promise. This dream is a promise of restoration. Through the years, I had to ask myself, could I really forgive Dad after all he had said and done to me? With God's help, I chose to forgive him anyway, even though his actions towards me at that point were unchanged. Even after I forgave my dad, I secretly longed for a better relationship with him. Deep inside, though, I'll confess that after 74 years, I expected Dad to die a bitter, angry old man. 2 years ago in December, we got the news.
Dad was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, given 90 days to live. And I prayed, God, please don't let it end like this. Not like this. And came the chemo, lots of tests, and so I watched him growing weaker. About that time, I asked Dad, as a way of honoring him, Dad, could you tell me about the early years with your dad? He said, sure. December 14th, 2014, all 5 siblings gathered around Mom and Dad's kitchen table with Mom and Dad, planning the details of Dad's funeral. Speakers were chosen. Music was chosen. Gravestone was ordered. It's like, was this really happening? During all the planning, Dad began to share about the anguish and the abuse that he had endured from his dad. And for the first time, I heard the story of how he forgave his dad at a location on the farm. As he shared about the anguish of his early years, Dad asked, with tears streaming down his face, Darrell, will you forgive me? Yes, Dad, yes. That evening in December, generations of abuse was forgiven, cut off, no more to be a part of our family. More tests, 90 days go by, and we all wondered what the cancer doctor would find. The doctor was puzzled. He couldn't find any trace of cancer. A miracle had taken place. In meeting with Dad soon after, I couldn't help but notice that cloud of shame and depression that hung over Dad, after 74 years, was gone. Not only had Dad forgiven him, not only had Dad healed him of stage 4 cancer, he had also healed him emotionally. His calloused heart had become soft, even kind. On my drive home to Lancaster that night, I remembered that dream. And I felt strongly that I wanted to drive a stake to celebrate victory over those generational curses. So I designed a stake in the shape of a cross with 3 words on it: forgiven, restored, generations. I asked Dad, can you show me where you forgave your dad? When he showed me, I became overwhelmed with emotion. It was the exact spot in my dream 29 years ago where Dad had turned away from the bear and started walking back toward the family. My dad and my son Dallas and I took turns driving the stake at that spot that day. We stood around it and prayed, and we celebrated restoration. Instead of those early messages I got from Dad, my orphan heart's getting new messages. God's given me new names like adopted son, chosen son of the Most High God, approved, full of grace, not of judgment, a celebrated son. God sees me as forgiven. God wasn't punishing me all those years. God's restoring what the enemy stole from me as a boy. Those haunting voices, well, they're quiet now. New messages, adopted son, celebrated son. I'm so proud of my dad for finishing well. He chose to forgive, to allow God to cut off those generational curses and to send new messages to his children. Thank you, Dad, for forever changing the legacy of our family. I honor you today for choosing to forgive, for the courage to forgive. I am so proud of you. What the enemy intended for evil, God has turned to good.